I believe we're live now. Hello, everyone. It's great to have you here on another live event. This event we're having today is with HarperDB, of course, and we're going to walk you through how to build an inventory management tool using HarperDB. So if you're just joining us, please say hello in the chat. I'd love to meet you. We'd love to know where you're joining in from. So please let us know by sending us a message in the chat. While you do that, I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda for today's event. So we'll start by meeting our friends who are joining us on this stream. We have two guests joining us today, so we are going to meet them and get to know them better. Then we'll move on to talk about what HarperDB is and why you should care about it. And lastly, we'll focus on building the application, which today's demo is centered around. So it's going to be, we're going to cover setting up the database. Would also cover building the UI on Appsmith. More importantly, setting up access control, setting up users, setting up roles, all of that stuff will be covered in today's video. So I hope you catch that and enjoy it as much as we would while building it together. And lastly, we'd also have a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please share them in the chat. If it's possible for us to take it right now, we would. But if not, you can wait to the end of the event so that we can discuss all of the questions that you may have. Okay, I can see Nelson and Viha joining us. It's nice to have you, Nelson. Also nice to have you, Viha. All right, so I believe we can get started. First, we would be welcoming Paul. Paul is a backend developer, specifically focusing on Python. He is also a Microsoft Learn student ambassador and a technical writer. In fact, Paul wrote the article that got the ball rolling for today's event. So I'm going to be sharing that article in the link on the chat. I'll be sharing a link on the chat so that you can go check it out. It's a really nice article and it explains how you can get rolling with HarperDB and Appsmith. So I'm going to add Paul to the stream right now and let's get to the meeting. Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Hey, confidence.
Awesome. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. Thanks for having
So
me.
so we'd love to get to know you better. Can you tell me one or two things about you and introduce yourself to the audience?
Uh, Hi, everyone. Confidence did a really good job introducing me there. I don't think I have much to say. So, like you said, I am a student. Uh, I'm also a backend developer. I'm a Microsoft student learn ambassador. So, part of what we do as ambassadors is to, build communities and encourage learning across campuses across the world. So that's part one here, to encourage learning as well. I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. It's nice having you. So jumping back to the slide, I have one more guest I'll be introducing today, and we have Jaxon Repp joining us from HarperDB. So Jackson is the head of product at HarperDB. He's also a cat person, unfortunately, because I know HarperDB to be a brand built around dogs and the loyalty and integrity that they share. So it's a bit weird that he's a cat person and not a dog person. And his favorite tagline is "It should just work." So I'm just going to add Jackson to the stream right now, and maybe he can justify why he's a cat person and not a dog person.
In my defense, I had a dog at one point, and then somehow got supplanted by two cats, as is nature in life. Because at the end of the day, they're lower maintenance, they're more independent, they're more reflective of my personality, and I had small kids, so I figured somebody needed to watch over them if it wasn't going to be me. And cats are more maternal. Feels like they are.
Cool. It's nice. It's nice having you here, and we would love to know more about HarperDB. So, can you walk us through? Tell us all of the features. What HarperDB is great at. I'm sure everyone joining in right now would love to know.
Sure. HarperDB is a distributed database. So, in addition to being able to store data of any kind, and that includes both traditional columnar, like key value pairs, We can also store JSON data. So we're extremely flexible in terms of what you put in. And then we are a distributed database in that nodes of HarperDB can talk to each other and move data wherever it needs to be. So it's not just replicating the full set of data across multiple nodes of HarperDB. You can have edge instances that are close to your customer that have only the data that they need. And you can have then cloud instances that are more central repositories for, say, all of the user interactions that you're recording on those edge nodes. We have a built-in API, an HTTP API. So rather than like many databases in your backend code, implementing some sort of a plugin or a driver, and basically having to remember to open your connection, execute a transaction, close your connection, don't saturate your connection, don't overwhelm the connection. It's simple atomic HTTP call. We found that most applications are already making those anyway. So it seemed like a pretty good standard interface to use for interacting with HarperDB. And then the other component, the core component of HarperDB, is what we call custom functions, which are user-defined pieces of functionality a la a Lambda server function in AWS, where you write simple JavaScript handlers for API endpoints that you define. And those handlers can interact directly with HarperDB. They can make, in turn, their own third-party API calls. You can authenticate against, say, an Azure AD server. So ultimately, we really wanted to reduce the complexity of developing an app into just deploy HarperDB and let us manage all of the processes that you use to affect and interact with your data.
Awesome, awesome. I was just going to say that I was looking at the chat right now, and we are starting a cat versus dog war. So maybe you can check it out and say something nice to keep it down, because I can see some people saying they love dogs. Some people are saying cat power, and me, I don't have any pets, and I really don't have any opinion here. And as you do that, I was just thinking about my favorite HarperDB feature, and I think it's the ability to query in multiple forms. So you can write SQL queries, which some developers are familiar with, but for newer developers who may not be so familiar with SQL, you can actually write new SQL queries, and you just get the work done the same way as writing SQL queries.
That's correct. I mean, we found that being able to be flexible in terms of the data you put into the database is great. Being able to get that out using a traditional architecture, like a traditional NoSQL architecture, like a MongoDB, is super useful. But if you've ever developed anything on traditional document stores, you know that joining collections or tables is difficult, and it's something you actually end up doing in code. And so SQL joins are incredibly powerful and incredibly useful. And most of the apps that I've developed where I thought, oh yeah, I'll use some document store NoSQL solution, at the end of the day, it all comes back to joining data back together. So SQL is incredibly useful, which is one of the reasons we decided to build HarperDB the way we did. Ultimate flexibility in terms of how you store it, but also the power of the SQL language you already know.
Awesome, awesome. Are there any situations where you would advise against using SQL? Maybe any trade-offs with using SQL, especially with HarperDB?
Well, I think there are a lot of queries where you are simply looking for a hash attribute or for a particular value to be equal to something. Those are lightning fast and easier to build, honestly. Obviously, SQL queries are a string, ultimately, of words that you put together in order to represent the data that you want to get back out. We have lots of NoSQL commands where when you're not joining tables, you can effectively build a JSON object that represents your query, which is easier to do programmatically than crafting a string and putting in template literals. But it's also faster because we don't have to parse that SQL first before we go and get the data that you're requesting. So there's a little bit for the people who love SQL and already have their data and are simply replacing an existing system. It's a very easy way to just pick up your queries, move them over, and duplicate your app functionality in HarperDB. But over time, we think that most developers find that the NoSQL structure of querying data becomes easier to implement in your code, because again, it's a JSON object that you craft with the parameters you want.
Awesome, awesome. So if I get you, what you're saying is that if you're really doing, if you're only doing simple operations, go with NoSQL. But if you need something more complicated, like doing table joins, SQL would be a great fit for that.
Correct.
Awesome, awesome. So I guess we have the intro of HarperDB out of the way. Except you may have more things to talk about. If you have a slide prepared, we would love to see it.
Well, I mean, I'd rather just hop into the actual UI that kind of shows you, because then I can talk about, not only what HarperDB can do, but I can talk about, how you would actually do it in person, if that's cool.
Okay, yeah. Please go ahead, share the screen.
Great. All right.
By the way, someone on the chat says he loves plants and no pets. All right, so we have a screen.
You are looking at the screen. So this is the HarperDB Studio. It's located at studio.harperdb.io. This is where you can sign up for an account, a free account, spin up a free instance, which is what we've done here. Once you log in, you can simply click Create New HarperDB Cloud Instance, choose our database as a service, or if you wanted to install HarperDB locally and then register your instance here, there's also a free tier for locally installed instances, and you can have as many of those as you'd like. We just register them so that at the end of the day, it's a place for you to come and see where all your instances are, to connect them if you're setting up a cluster of HarperDB. And ultimately, this is your management suite for HarperDB. If you're going to create a cloud instance, you can choose to run on HarperDB Cloud. We also have Verizon Wavelength instances. Those are instances that are only available to clients that are on Wavelength. They offer extremely fast speeds and response times because you never enter the public internet, which if you have a mobile app that is, on Verizon's network, extremely cool solution that offers 10 millisecond late queries. You can choose your cloud name, and I'll just put in some stuff. And then you can choose, the free tier, which is 0.5 gig of RAM, storage size, which is 1 gig of storage is free, and then your instance region. We're working on expanding our regions. And then all you have to do is just confirm instance details and spin it up. Now, we've already, for the purposes of this demo, done that with this instance. So I'll actually click into the demo instance we have here. And you can see there's no data or in the table yet. This is where we browse. We also have a query window where you can execute SQL queries against your data. You can set up users. There's only one user right now. Roles, and we'll go into that as we do our demo. You can set up charts. First, you run a query, you get back the set you're looking for, and then you can build a chart to go with it. So rudimentary charting.
Okay, I did not know that was available. That's really cool. I did not know that was available.
Clustering, this is the way HarperDB instances speak to each other. Since we don't have another instances in this organization, we won't set that up today. But super easy, just create a cluster user and then enable it, and then you can connect to other instances that have that same cluster user. Custom functions. This is our user-defined code, so it's super easy to define your own API endpoints with access to core HarperDB methods. Lots of documentation at docs.harperdb.io, as well as some videos along that, and lots of other webinars we've done on those. Status. This is where you can go and look at how much memory is available in the instance, which is 0.5 gig, how much is left, free disks, stuff like that, as well as access to your logs. Configuration, if you wanted to license this, say with more RAM locally, we could spin this up with 1 gig of RAM, 2 gig of RAM, resize your instance, and we can also change your storage size. And then one of the best parts is example code. So if you go to api.harperdb.io, you'll see a Postman collection. that documents all of these operations and examples. And in any language, we have actually taken the credentials for our instance and put them in there. And you can do that in Java, or you could do that in a shell command or C#. So it's super easy to just grab any code you want, snip it, and then execute insert, update, upsert, delete, or search by hash. So very, very easy to interact with HarperDB, and that's really what we want to focus on.
Cool. Awesome.
So
I was just going to add to what you said, that here in the studio, it's also possible for you to change your theme. So if you're not a light theme person, you can click on the toggle and choose the dark theme. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Thank you. I did that without asking anybody. It just felt like we needed a bunch of themes.
Yeah, it looks cool. It looks cool. So can we go on with building the app, because you have been able to walk us through HarperDB, and what is left now for us is to set up the backend, set up the roles and the users and roles, and then we can go build the UI on Appsmith.
Correct. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what the app is?
Okay, yeah, I can do that. So today we'll be building an inventory management app, and it's a simple app to manage DVD rentals. So for a DVD store, you have a person in the storefront that manages the rentals. When a customer walks up to rent a movie, that person could be called an assistant. So we would have an assistant user who is able to interact with customers and rent out these movie DVDs. Then there will also be a second user for the application, one with more privileges, like a manager, for example. A manager sitting in his office, being able to register customers and change the price of the rentals. So today's app will be focused on creating those users, being able to log those users separately into the application, making authenticated requests using user credentials, and then segmenting a dashboard so that the right user account is able to see the right part of the application. So that's a brief overview of the app we'll be building today.
Cool. And
all right.
I'll go through the process of designing the data schema that will back this application. A schema is ultimately our high level, consider it like a database in like a competing, like a SQL Server or MongoDB. So a schema is the high level. So I'll create one called movie because that's the name of our app. And then in our rental service, we're going to have customers, and one second here. And our hash attribute is ID. Hash attribute is the attribute that is most similar to, say, a primary key in another database.
Yes.
So we're going to create customer, and we'll create rental, we're going to create film, which is obviously the inventory stuff that we are going to rent to our customers. And then rental, which is the table that is comprised of the actual rental actions that customers have taken against the films. And we have some dummy data to stick in here so the application will work. This icon right here allows you to upload a customer CSV. I'm going to drag that in there. Looks like we got 599 records. We'll put those into movie.customer. We'll go into film. We have 1,000 films. Let's show this. And then all right, 16,000 records. So now we've got the data to drive our application, and we want to set up roles that have specific access and permissions on these various tables. So
Cool.
as I create a role, the super user is a user that has access to absolutely everything and every operation. That's the user we're using to manage the tables and insert data. Cluster users are the users that move back and forth data between HarperDB instances. And then standard roles are the roles we're talking about. And we've already talked a little bit about the fact that we're going to have a manager who is an admin user. And they're going to have access to do everything on every table. So I'll just, by default, we lock down everything and nobody has permission to read, insert, update, or delete anything on any table in a custom role. This is useful when, say, you add a new attribute to a table or add a new table. Users don't, by default, have access to that new table. So always remember that we err on the side of security when we can. So now I've created an admin user who can perform any action on all three tables. So I'm going to update those role permissions. I'm now going to create a second role, which is a rental user. And this person would be, say, the assistant who's at the counter, and their UI only requires that they can pull back the movies, they can read the movies, they can read the customers, and they can add and edit rental events, but they can't write or delete any users or customers, any users or films. So I'll create a rental user. And again, in the rental table, they can read all the rental records, create new rental records, update them, even delete rental records. For film, they need to read them, but they do not need to update that film database or delete anything. Same with customers. They need to be able to read those customers, but they do not need to be able to edit them in any way.
Yeah.
So we will create that. And now that we've set up the roles, we're going to set up users. The first user is the assistant. And the assistant is going to be the rental user. Add user. And then we'll set up the manager. Add a user. Great. So now we've set up our users, we've set up our roles, we've created our schemas, created our tables, and we've loaded dummy data into the system. So from a back-end perspective, from a data perspective, HarperDB is completely set up for the Appsmith app. So now I'll unshare my screen and I will turn it over.
Yeah, that was really easy to set up. I think you just demonstrated how easy it is to get up and running with HarperDB. All right, so I think we can move on to the part where we implement the auth system on Appsmith, and we have Paul on hand to walk us through that. Okay, maybe we'll start sharing.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
All right, great. So here's what the interface for the application would look like. So here we have rentals. It's just a table that shows us, the rentals are available on the database. And here we have a form that allows us to change or edit any rental. So if the status has been changed, the manager can easily come here and edit the status of that particular rental. So what we're going to be doing here essentially is to take what Jaxon has worked on and add some role-based access on top of our application. And how we want to do that is to use tokens. So another useful feature that AppDB provides is by allowing us to add roles and creating users on top of our database is get tokens for each kind of user or each kind of role on the database. And so what we want
Yep.
to do is to add another layer uh, of authentication on top of our application. And how I'm going to do that is to add a login page such that the manager and customer can log in into the application using their credentials. And then from the token that we get from HarperDB, we can react accordingly. So certain things shouldn't be shown to the certain kind of permissions that they have. So for example, only the manager should be allowed to see all three tabs and should be allowed to execute every single query that you see here. So we've gone ahead to write a couple of queries that will make, and as you can see, some of them use no SQL queries to interact with the HarperDB instance SQL here to demonstrate just you can, how powerful your HarperDB. So what we want to do is to first of all head over to our pages, create a new page. So on this new page, we're going to add a log form on this new page here. So we come over to widgets, and from here we can add a form. I can see form. Aha. So we just all you have to do is click and drag onto in this new page here. So we get an input to take in the user's username, and we need another input to take in their password. So I'm just going to add labels to this as well. Using text.
Yeah, that's the text window. To make it easy to bring in widgets, something I also do is type the name of the widget to search for it. So that's going to make this widget easier
Oh,
to find.
you can do that. I had no idea. So we're going to call this username. I can just copy this. So drag this down, change this to password. So we change this to password. And of course, we only need one button, so we can just take this one out. So, whoa. I just need to take it out. Of course, I've changed it to login. All right. So what we're going to do is to, I should probably also change this to sign in. What we're going to do is to take the credentials that the user enters into this field and then send a request back to get tokens from HarperDB very easily by just adding an on-click action or an on-click event from Appsmith. Appsmith provides us with a number of options here, and what we want to do is to execute a simple JS function. We could also execute the query if you wanted to. So I'm going to click on new JS object, and and here it will bring me to um, this new page here where I can write a simple JavaScript function that will allow me to send a request to some external API and get data back from there. So I'm just going to take this out. That's more than enough. I'm going to call this function login. Call this function login. And basically, what it's going to do is just to send a request on our behalf, or basically just fetch the tokens. So here it's going to return get token. Now already we have uh, queries written to help. Sorry, let me just fetch that real quick. Oh, I thought I already wrote that. Here we have to create a new query that helps us log in. So from here, I'm going to create a new query, call it get token. So this should be blank API. Yes, that's what I want. This is going to send a request to our AppDB instance, and here we're going to ask for a new token here. So it's really easy. We define the operation, which is create authentication tokens. Then we use the mustard syntax to refer to the fields from here. So this is our input one, as you can see, and here is input two. So we use mustard syntax to refer to those two fields to grab the data from that field and then send that to our HarperDB API, and this should return valid tokens for us to us, depending on the kind of user that's logged in. So if I run this, you see here it says invalid credential because I haven't passed in any uh, credentials to the form. So
Yeah.
let me just put something here. I think it was assistance, if I'm correct. Then one, two, three, four. If I go back to the API, I fill the form. I go back to the API and I send a request. Did I get the password right?
Yeah, I think it's 1 2 to 6.
Oh,
So
okay.
1 2 3 4. Yeah,
All right.
1 to 6.
If I add this password and I go back to the API, all I have to do is just click run, and you see I should get uh, tokens. So these are JWTs, and HarperDB sends you a pair of them. This is the token that actually validates your request, subsequent request from now on. And this one helps you to get, oh, this is a refresh token that helps you get new tokens once this one is expired. I believe the expiration time is about 24 hours, if I am not mistaken. So what we want to do is to grab this data, store it somewhere, and then use it for our subsequent requests. And that's what these JS objects will be helping us with. So basically what I want to do is, first of all, let me rename this API. Let me call this something else. So I'm going to call it
Um,
get
I think people are finding it a bit difficult to see. Would it be possible for you to zoom in a bit?
zooming. Oh,
Yeah.
is it better
Yes,
now?
I think this should be better.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to rename this API get token. Now head back to my JS object. And here what I want to do is just call this API, and I can do that here within this code block by just calling the name. Yeah, AppDB, sorry, Appsmith automatically recognizes that I have a resource that's called getToken, and I can just call the run method on top of that, and that will fetch me the results from this API object. And what I want to do is to add uh, a I believe this is a promise in JavaScript. I'm not quite conversant with the language, so let me just get that. What we want to do is to store our tokens. So when we fetch the results, we pass that into this promise and then call on the store value method that Appsmith provides us with. What this does is allows you to store, it utilizes your browser's local store and allows you to store data inside of there. And what we want to store is the user's credentials. So we've sent we've sent a query to fetch tokens and we've gotten back valid tokens from HarperDB. Now we need to store that token somewhere. And this is the provision that AppSmith gives us using the store value functionality. We can add, this is basically like key value pair data structure. So you have the user key and it maps to, I believe this is called, they call these objects in JavaScript. So it maps to an object, and in there we're basically just storing the username of the user that currently logged in and the token that we got from our request. Yeah. Okay. One last thing we need to do is to navigate to the application. So after we fetch the token, we need to redirect whoever just logged in to the corresponding page or widgets that they have to see once they are in the application. And we're going to call the navigate to method that AppSmith also provides us with. These are inbuilt, by the way. You don't have to, they're not. I didn't write them elsewhere, so you can call them from wherever you are in your application. So I'm just calling navigate to. So this takes in the name of the page where we want to navigate to. So we want the user, of course, to go back to the application, and that page is called app here. So we have two pages so far. We have a login page, which is where the user is going to log in from, and then the actual application, and it's called app. So we navigate the user to app, and from there we will be processing the data that is stored inside of our local storage here and use that to determine what kind of data we should show to this user that is logged in. So as far as HarperDB is concerned, as far as AppSmith is concerned, it doesn't know just how much permission the user has on the backend, which is the database that Jackson has showed us. So here we have to infer from the token that they have and using their some other payload that we've stored elsewhere and kind of determine what kind of access we should give to this user. And we'll be seeing that in a minute. This last line basically catches any errors that there are and shows it to us. So we head over to the page. Now, uh, I should probably also change this to be a more ideal looking password. So you can always come here on Appsmith. So if you have a field like this, you can change the data type that you want to store in it. So there are a number of options here, and I'm going to change the password.
Yeah.
That way it looks
So,
more appropriate. Yeah. So now I should be able to click on login, and if you recall, we added an on-click action to the login button, such that when that button is clicked, it automatically calls this JS object, and we just went over what that JavaScript object does. So I'm just going to try and log in now. So I click on that.
it looks like the action was not binded to the button.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Probably have to do that again. So let's go back to the on-click action. Oh yeah, we haven't added it. So on-click action, execute the JavaScript function. I had to create a new one before. So now we have JavaScript objects. and we want to call the login function from within that object. And now if I click on login, you see it will take me to the application. So I'm automatically uh, redirected to the application now. So on the application, we have a number of tabs on the main app and some features as well. So the currently logged in user will have certain restrictions based on the kind of data that we stored inside of our local storage. So what we can do now is, from the story that has been told, assistants should only be able to see rentals, and I believe they can't see film. Can they see film? Confident.
No, no, they don't have the permission
Okay,
to
so
update
they
it.
are all right. So they can only see rentals. Now, if you look closely at this page, these are what you call tabs, and uh, I believe you can easily relate this to like your Chrome browser tabs. So we can bundle up things inside of the tab widget and have multiple tabs in there. So what we can do, one cool thing that Appsmith allows us is this visible or a visibility constraint on every of our widget. So what we can do is to toggle this based on the constraints that we give to the widget. So what I want to do is to toggle this visibility based on a constraint, and that constraint is going to come from what I have stored previously, just right after the user logged in. So I'm going to click on JS, and by default it's set to true. So it's a it's a knob. So obviously there's the on and off states, and I can use JavaScript to kind of infer what state it should be based on the data that I have. And that's what we are going to do here. You can see that as I cleared it out, it just I don't know what the word is for it. It doesn't look visible anymore. So what we want to
Yeah.
do here is to check if the username that we have, the username that we have is maybe so we can validate using like an email address. So if we have email address that are peculiar to perhaps only managers or admins, then we could use that as a constraint. Or perhaps if we have usernames, which is what applies to our case, we have usernames that are peculiar to certain kind of users, so we can use that to, you know, as a constraint, basically. So what I want to say is, if what I have is Appsmith store, so and I can call the store object to using by calling Appsmith dot store. Sorry. So if I call Appsmith dot store, it fetches me. It allows me access to the local storage. And if you recall, we stored some things in there. We stored token and the username inside of there. And now I can say user dot username. So if what I have in there is uh, not equals to, what was the what do you call admin's confidence? What do you call it? Is it just admin?
So you have an assistant and you have a manager.
Okay, is it man? It's called manager, yeah, as in manager, right?
Yeah,
If I
but I
got that
think
right. So if
yeah, but I was thinking this tab you're working on should only be disabled if the user is not logged in, because this is the entire tab widget. So if a user does not have a token, you don't want that user to be able to see the entire tab.
Well, am I on the? Is this the entire? Oh, sorry about that. Okay, okay. We want to add three. So there's a bigger tab in which there are now three other tabs. So we have rental, film, and customers. So of course, if you have this is kind of like a managerial tool. So not everybody should have access to this tool, obviously. So a random user shouldn't, of course, be allowed to access the application. So we are going to add a layer of protection on top of that as well. So say you deploy this application and somebody randomly finds access to your application, they shouldn't be able to see all of this. And that's where that visibility on top of this main tab comes in. So we're just going to add check if this if there's a token in our local storage at all before we now start to check what kind of user is currently logged in. So let's do appsmith.store dot user dot token. So what this does is it basically just like I said, this evaluates to a boolean value, and we're saying if there is a token in here, then you are allowed to view this page. If there is no token, this is two negatives making it positive here. So not appsmith.store.user.token. So but however we do have a token, and that's why we can see what is here. So
Cool.
now let's head over to I can see them from here already. So from this main tab, so what one thing allows you to do is you can access these tabs since they are nested inside of each other. So you can access them from here with the tabs. So I want to add another layer of security here, obviously, because even though you have a token, I need to know what kind of user you are. So only managers have access to every single resource on our application, and the assistant has access to just rentals. So yes, am I correct? Is rentals, yeah?
For the film and the customer, the roles is set up in the database dictates that an assistant won't be able to perform CRUD operations on a film and customer.
Okay, okay. So this one, so we're going to just from the tab options, we will click on the settings knob here, and then we can also manage the visibility of these two tabs here based on what is there. So since I already know that both users will at least have access to rental, the assistant will always see the manager and assistant will at least always see rental. Only the assistant doesn't have access to film and customer, so we just need to add security on top of those two. So I'm going to click on the tab, go to film, and these are only allowed to be shown if appsmith.store dot user dot username not equals to assistant, right? So if I come and already you can see that it's gone. Film is no longer showing up here because what we have in the store is an assistant username, and here I'm asking the question of whether or not this is who we have is a manager. If it's not a manager, then what we don't want them to have access to that tab. So like go back, we're going to do the same thing on customers. Then we click on JS, so we can. Did I copy it? Oh, I did. So it's gone as well. So now the assistant has access to just rentals as he or she should. So I think okay. One more thing we need to do is to let me add a logout button here for user experience sake. I mean, why not? So let's go to widgets. This widgets, pick a button. Can I pass this? Oh, my eyes. Okay, so pick a button. We'll call this button uh, logout. I think I can change the. I believe I can change the color to like red or so. Okay, yes. But I do not. Okay. Wait. So I'm going to put this up. Put this up here. So we have a logout, maybe outside. So, right here. Maybe just like. So we have a logout button, and what we want to do is to attach another uh, on-click action or event on top of this button, such that when we click on the logout button, we take out everything we have in store. So that we're just going to clear the local storage of the tokens and whatnot that we have in there. So I'll come here, come to execute a JS function, and oh, we don't already have it. So let's just go back to our application. Sorry, still on the auth page. I should probably rename this to a better name. Still on the auth page, we will go back to. Why do I have this? It's token expired. So we'll go back to JS objects and add a new logger, a new function. And what this does is, let me just fetch that. So, okay.
So I'm thinking for the logout function, all it should do would be to delete what is in the store, right?
Yes, we have to take that. So I think I have it in I have the button in the wrong place as well. It shouldn't be on the logout, yeah, on the same page as the login. So so we're going to move that button and make put the you it makes sense for you to log out while you're already logged into an application, not on the same page as your login.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that. Uh, let's cut that out. Go to our application and then drop that here. I think this is too zoomed in for me. So, so I'm just going to drop that button here. Okay. Right. Let's do that. Okay. So I don't mess this up. Let me just leave the button there because I don't trust that I'll be able to drag it all the way up without making a mess here. So we'll have a logout button somewhere here, and I can just add a. I believe I can write the script right inside of here. by just clicking on here, since it's just simple logic that we're about to write. So what we want to do is to access store value, then clear out the cache, or just reset it to an empty object. So we call store value, we call user. Since we stored it with a key, if you remember, we stored it with a key of user, and then set it to uh, an empty object. Then also want to redirect the user back to the login page. So from here, we say navigate to let me rename this page to auth. Okay. So this should, so if I click on logout, now you see so all of these pages are now what's it called, blurred out, because the token has been taken out and we no longer have access to our application anymore. However, we're yet to be able to redirect. What else am I missing from here? Okay, I believe I'm not supposed to. Pardon me, I'm not quite used to JavaScript. This is all. Where am I? So I need to edit one last edit on that logout. And you can see saying here these queries are failed because of course we don't have a valid token array. We can no longer make those requests because we cleared the token from local storage. Where is that button? Okay, it's down here. So I just click on it. Not click on. Okay, here. So this is what I want to change.
Yeah, I think they should all be in the same
Yeah, exactly.
binding. You actually have
Like,
extra, yeah, you have extra curly braces from the
oh,
first binding.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe I click on logout now, it should take me back to the, yes, we are on the signing page again. So now let's try to log in as an admin user. It's admin, right?
The manager.
A manager. Okay. So we log in as a manager. I believe the password is the same. So click on login, fetch a new token, then it will be redirected to the application. This time we will have access to all three tabs because of course we're not an assistant, and we can perform some operations from here. So I can change one of these rentals to maybe lost, change to lost, so I can update last. And of course we have queries that are already reaching out to manage all of this. So automatically the that particular entry in the database will automatically be updated, and we're able to make this request because we have a valid token that allows us to perform these operations. And if you're logging as an assistant, you cannot perform these operations in the first place because right from here we can already tell who you are and we can manage your access to the application accordingly.
Awesome. Awesome. This looks good. This looks good. Thank you for implementing the auth flow using Appsmith. So I think we can take a few questions now. We have a couple of questions on the chat, and let's just take a couple of them. Okay, so we have some questions that would be taken by Jackson. So let me just highlight them on the screen and let's talk a bit about them. So we have Alex asking if it's possible to host HarperDB on his local machine.
Absolutely. We have both a Docker container. So if you're developing using Docker, it's super easy to just Docker run HarperDB. As well, we are an npm installable package. So you can npm i-g HarperDB, and that will install it. And that requires, of course, that you have Node.js and npm installed. There are specific versions of Node that we support. All of that can be found at docs.harperdb.io, and then you just click on installation. It'll tell you exactly how to accomplish it for whatever platform you might be operating on.
Cool, cool. These are various installation options. We have one more question here from S. He asks, is HarperDB open source or open core?
We are not open source. We have custom function templates and lots of ways to interact with HarperDB that are open source. But as of right now, because we are a startup and we needed to be able to license this, not just as a service, as a services model, there are lots of great open source databases, but some of the best ones I've ever known are no longer around because at the end of the day, we have to pay for stuff. If you can look at like a MongoDB, they basically had to rework their license so people would stop having hosted MongoDB parties or services on top of their open source code. So ultimately, we made the choice to open source as much as we can in terms of how you interact with HarperDB. And it's not off the table forever. It's just a function of how are we going to hang around long enough to establish enough of a footprint in the market that our value prop was out there and we could support ourselves financially.
Cool, cool. That's quite understandable. So I believe that's all the questions we have. Oh, you have more to add?
No.
Okay. I thought you wanted to add more to it. All right, cool. So I believe we don't have any new questions. If you have any questions, please leave them so that we can address. But in the absence of no new questions, I think we can call it a day here. So it's been nice having both Paul and Jaxon from HarperDB come talk to us about HarperDB.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. So catch you guys next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.